My name is David Manning, and I am a recovery liaison out of Springfield, Missouri. And I work with Freedom City Church, which is, and underneath that umbrella we have Straight Street Recovery Homes and also the Hope Homes of the Ozarks.
So you're from Missouri?
Yeah.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for coming out and taking the time out this morning to come and share your story with us. So let's get started right at the beginning. Can you tell us about your childhood, what it was like? You know, did you grow up with both parents? Did you experience any trauma, that kind of thing?
Well, my parents divorced at a very young age, and that turned into my mom was a severe alcoholic, and my dad was a severe drug addict, specifically crack and methamphetamine. So my early childhood was broken at an early age. And, my earliest memories is of my mom leaving us at parks while she went to the bar. And then even with my father, my earliest memories would be of him strung out on methamphetamine, boarding up the windows in the house and selling everything we had. And, just complete darkness of addiction in my early childhood.
Wow. So when did you first start experimenting with drugs and alcohol?
So me and my dad, we purchased our first drugs together at 10 years old. It was just marijuana, but by 13, my dad began being prescribed opioids. So it started with hydrocodone, and then it went into fentanyl patches, and then morphine and Dilaudid. I caught my first felony at 13 years old.
Wow.
And then by 16 years old, I had lived in 12 different states. I lived in 4 different states, went to 12 different schools, dropped out of high school. And the way my dad really showed me that he loved me throughout my teenage years is he would take his prescription drugs and he'd give me my half, and he'd take his half so I could make money, get high. And ultimately, by 18 years old, because of this friendship that me and my dad had, I was an IV drug user by 18 years old.
Did you have any siblings?
Yes, I
that
did.
were going through this with you?
Yep, I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters.
Okay.
And my sister Cassandra pretty much was right there with my dad. It was me, my dad, and my sister.
I see.
We were partners in crime all the way up until a couple years ago.
So this was like normal for you, like normal kind of chaos from the beginning.
So my teenage years were consumed by, I wasn't quite an IV drug user until 18, so my teenage years was pretty much festivals and raves and a lot of alcohol, marijuana, pills and things like that. But once I became an IV drug user, that's when I really didn't care. I didn't care about anybody except for myself. I began stealing, from the community and just breaking into people's houses and different businesses and things like that, but which led me to prison for my first time.
Okay. And how long were you in prison the first time?
The first time I only did a treatment in prison, which was 4 months. Being released after 4 months, of course, I went back to the same old thing as soon as I got out.
Right.
And then within months, went back to prison for my second time. I did about a year. I was about 3 months from being released from prison, and I was doing another treatment in Missouri. They do a lot of treatments. Usually at the end of your sentence, they make you do like 3 months treatment. So I was working treatment in communication with my son's mom, and we planned on having a good life together and things like that. But I was called into the counselor's office, and they asked me to sit down, and I thought I'd done something wrong. But they informed me that my son's mom was actually hot-shotted, robbed, and murdered in Springfield, Missouri. So when I got out, so it devastated me. Something like this completely broke my entire life, even worse than it already was. So when I was released a couple months later, instead of coming home to Springfield, Missouri, I went to my mom's in Illinois, and within a week I did this heroin for my first time.
Wow. So, I guess then what happened when you started getting into heroin?
So, me and my sister, Cassandra, she's the first one to give me heroin when I got out. And I was only out a few months. I was on ankle bracelet. We began going to Chicago, getting heroin. I remember going up there and bringing a batch back, and my sister met me at the house, and we both did a shot together at the same time. We both overdosed at the same time, and my mom came into the room, found both of her kids, needles everywhere, bags of dope everywhere. Of course, she called the ambulance. The cops came. We both got hit with Narcan, and we both got brought back by Narcan. But of course, they found all the dope, and which ultimately violated my parole,
Right.
and I went back to prison for my third time.
So, how many times have you been to prison?
I've been to prison 6 times.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you're just...
In 2 different states.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
In and out, and in and out. So, after the next couple of times in prison, did you continue with heroin?
Every time I got out. So the thing about my dad again is all I had to do was get him on the phone, and the next time his prescriptions came in, a bag of pills was just a phone call away, came straight. Anytime I got out, he would send me whatever I wanted, FedEx. So I could go to a different state, he'd still FedEx me his prescriptions, which would get me back on opioids, and then I would go back to heroin.
Right.
And then every time I got out, within days, I was back using again.
During these these periods where you were out of prison, did you ever seek any kind of treatment at all, or were you ever like...
I was stipulated to treatment, but
Okay.
I never wanted to be there, or once I got high, that's the only thing that my mind would ever be on.
Right.
I wouldn't care about anybody else. I mean, deep down inside, I always wanted something different, but if you remember back to my childhood, that's all I ever knew. So I was kind of programmed in a way to only be focused on drugs.
So think back to 2 weeks before you got sober for this time. What were those days like, and what was the turning point? Was it prison?
It was prison.
Okay.
So the last time, in 2014, I found another girlfriend overdosed in a bathtub. She passed away in 2014, which threw me in I'd even deeper not care about anybody. So what I decided to do is this was in Springfield, Missouri. I decided to put on a backpack, and I went to Portland, Oregon, and I began living under bridges, flying signs, panhandling to support my heroin addiction, eating food out of dumpsters. I remember laying under the bridge in Portland, Oregon, on a piece of cardboard box, sores on my feet, dope sick, just thinking that this is who I was, and that I was really destined to die under a bridge, a worthless heroin addict. But a few weeks later, I was picked up on felony charges and extradited back to Springfield, Missouri, and that was 2014. And there, I had a real encounter with my faith, and which really began the process of me wanting something truly different in my life. However, I did go do one more treatment in DOC. It was only a 4-month treatment. And when I was released this time, I was released. My sister, Cassandra, had actually been arrested herself about a year before. And she was stipulated to drug court. And she began to engage in drug court. And her whole life was similar to mine, and even worse, because sometimes we know that women have it a lot worse in addiction. So, but when I got locked up, my sister began telling me about recovery. So I didn't really know anything about recovery, but my sister really played a big part in telling me about recovery and how it's possible. She got a job, she got her GED, she began working towards getting her kids back, and everything really began to be restored in her life. And so yeah, she so after I did this 4-month treatment, she got me a home plan to a recovery home in Springfield. And when I was released, I got out with all the intentions of doing good and following my sister's example, but I chose to drink beer a couple days after I got out. 1 beer the second night, 3 beers the third night. I drank vodka, and by midnight I was back using heroin again, which put me in a deep cycle of addiction for another 6 months. And then the whole time I was on the streets, my sister would feed me, clothe me, meet me places. She even gave me money to support my addiction a couple times. But it was Thanksgiving 2015 that I was arrested my last time, and the last day that I used drugs was Thanksgiving 2015. And then I was back in Greene County Jail in Springfield, Missouri, again laying on the cement floor on a green mat. We've all been there, right? And I heard my sister's story. I heard, about who I could put my faith in, and different things, and just so broken laying on the cement floor. I didn't know any other way to turn, and it was at that point that I surrendered my life over, and I believe that it was that day that things truly changed in my life, and in my heart, and in my mind.
Wow. Quite a story. So you said 2015?
Yeah.
So you've been sober,
I'm going on 6 years,
6 years
sober this
Yeah,
Thanksgiving.
This November.
Yeah. So what happened is, I was sentenced in 2015 to a year-long treatment in the Department of Corrections. So they have 4-month treatments, they have 6-month treatments, which I had all done.
Right.
This time I got sentenced to a year-long treatment, sent to OCC. It's called Ozark Correctional Center in Fordland, Missouri. But and it was there that I truly began engaging in recovery. And what began to happen is I really needed not just 3 or 4 months clean working on myself. I needed a longer period of time. So I was actually locked up this time for 2 years, every day, engaging in recovery, engaging in my faith. And what began to happen is, I began to redevelop my way of thinking, my habits, my self-worth began to be restored. I didn't see my son, Tristan, not only one time in 10 years. After his mom passed away, my sister Cassandra began bringing him to Ozark Correctional Center, where I saw him for the first time in years. I mean, I only seen him one time, and we began to establish a relationship with one another. And then my Pastor John began to come into Ozark Correctional Center, and he began to share his vision and his story, right, the hope shot that he had, and he told me about the program that he had that was a reentry program from the Department of Corrections. So I decided to make that my home plan. I was released April 2017 into the Hope Homes program, the reentry program, and I was there. What this program really did was it opened a door for me to a faith community, a recovery community. So I was in that program for 5 months, and then from there I went to our sober living home, which is a transitional living, and I was in that house for 6 months, and then from there I went into our intern housing, and I did 6 months there, and then while in the intern housing and engaged in the recovery community, I ended up meeting my wife. So we ended up having 3 kids together. So I have 4 boys now. I have twins that are 3 years old. 3 years old. I have a 1.5-year-old son.
Oh.
And then my son Tristan, who I didn't see for just one time in 10 years.
Right.
Through the restoration and through me doing the right thing, working my recovery. After 2 years of being out of prison, he began living with me full time. So now he's lived with me for about 2 years now.
Wow. And how old is he now?
He's 14.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
So recovery hasn't been easy. Since being released from prison, I've dealt with a lot of losses. So my mom ended up passing away from stage 4 cancer a couple weeks after I was released from prison. And then my my sister Cassandra, who was my partner in crime for many years. So she was in drug court. She graduated drug court, and she was actually a speaker for drug court. She was a recovery liaison in Springfield. But when my mom got the cancer, she got very discouraged. The grief and loss really took control of her life, and she fell back into her addiction. She ended up battling with MAT for a couple years, and she was really fighting, and she ended up falling back into heroin addiction, and she was actually found passed away from a heroin overdose in 2018. So about little over 2 years now, my sister passed away.
I'm so sorry to hear that. I'm so sorry. This disease is unforgiving. So how did you get through that sober? I guess that's really the question here.
Through a community of other people that were there to support me. So if it wasn't for the difference from all the other times that I was released, so from prison, when I got out, I didn't have anybody else in recovery in the same faith that I had. So when I got out of prison this time, I surrounded myself with like-minded people, right? I rooted myself into the church that I'm involved in, and I have so many brothers and sisters in recovery now and then my wife and my kids. Another big thing is having purpose, right? So,
Right.
Being able to help others each and every day has really I had 2 decisions to make. I could allow the grief and loss from my mother, my sister. My father ended up passing away a month after my sister. So I could either allow the grief and loss to take me back into addiction, or I could use it as fuel, right? To be passionate about recovery.
Yeah.
And try to help other people fight this battle of addiction.
Right. And getting through that sober, you can help so many people, because we lose way too many people because of this disease, and it's hard to stay strong and stay in the community when you just want to numb the pain. But good for you, and you will be able to help a ton of people with your story.
Being released from prison this last time, I've dealt with I mean, we've done 5 funerals, overdose funerals at our church in the last couple years. Our community, of course, is devastated by fentanyl right now. It's an epidemic, and people are dying left and right. Since coming to getting out of prison and being engaged in the ministry that I'm involved with, we've lost many people. So instead of allowing that to put me back into my addiction, I allow it. Every person that passes away is just more fuel to my passion to continue to help other people.
Well, that is definitely the way to go, and definitely a good way to look at it. So on a little bit lighter note, what dreams have come true for you, and what hopes do you have for your future?
Okay, so a call on my life was placed upon my life to be a pastor. So I've actually, since being out of prison, I've only been out going on 5 years, but I just graduated with a bachelor's degree in biblical studies.
Wow.
So I'm actually eligible right now and I have the application I'm working on, that I'll be a credentialed minister here in just a few months.
Wow.
So I'm going to take my credentials, right, my degree and things like that, and I believe that God has a call on my life, right, to do the same thing that we're doing in Springfield, Missouri, right? So the vision is to replicate that model. My dream is to do it in cities that don't have. In Springfield, Missouri, there's, it's like a turf war for recovery there, right? There's so much recovery, but my heart and my passion is to take it to cities that don't have recovery. There's many cities right here in the U.S. who don't even know what recovery is.
Right. Absolutely. That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
The perfect kind of dream for you. So I'm sure you'll be able to do that. That's awesome. So can you describe a certain feeling that you have received through sobriety that was not there in active addiction?
Purpose. Right. So my whole life I thought my purpose was to influence others in a negative way. I mean, it was almost like a monster. I didn't care. It was almost like a goal of mine to get others to be, it's sad and it sounds really bad, but I would get people started on the needle, right? That many of them are not here today, right? So I've influenced many people in my life in a negative way to the point of death. But today I feel that I have a purpose in my heart, in my life, to influence other people, right? Instead of bringing death into their life, I can bring life
For sure.
to them.
I love that. So what are some intangible and tangible gifts that you have received in sobriety?
So it's very interesting that, 4.5 years ago, I had my mom, my dad, and my sister. They all passed away in the last couple of years, and they were my whole life. I have a couple other brothers and sisters, but my life radically and dramatically changed within a couple years. But of course, I was given the gift of my wife, right? So she is a nurse in Springfield. She does chemotherapy, and I'm able to be in ministry. I'm able to work in the recovery community and things like that because I have a wife that understands addiction, and she has a heart for people as well. So she allows me to, work a lot and be gone a lot and things like that. But just a wife that fully supports me is one of my greatest gifts.
Yeah, that sounds like it. She sounds like an amazing woman.
And then intangible, right? I think that one of the greatest gifts I have is, people who have been in addiction and have lived experience. So I have a lot of lived experience with addiction and, relating to people's pain and their loss and things like that. So one of my gifts is I'm able to really connect with people, and I have discernment. So Man, I really believe I have the gift to, people know my story. So I'm back in Springfield and in the very neighborhood that I used to use drugs. So people see me and what I'm doing, and I'm able to connect with them through my story and share with them my recovery.
For sure. Quite a turnaround of a life that you did. So what have you learned from your addiction?
What have I learned from my addiction? The number one thing that I have learned from my addiction is that in my addiction, I didn't care about anybody or anything. I didn't care about myself, my family, my kids. And the one thing that I've learned, I know it's easier said than done, but if we could just get people that are still struggling, right? That are still in bondage, if we can just get them in a place, a community, right? A support system, a place of accountability. I've learned that that's the place that true change happens, right? So getting people to engage, and man, addiction steals everything.
For sure.
I mean, it takes everything, and so yeah, that's the one thing that I've learned.
And what words of hope do you have for somebody that's trying to get sober?
Yeah, so I just want to encourage everybody that recovery is possible. I believe that if my sister Cassandra was here today sharing her story, with knowing she would tell people that recovery is a lifelong commitment, right? So with her, she took herself out of the accountability. She got complacent. She put herself in a place where she could manipulate other people and get away with what she was doing, right? So, but coming to this understanding that recovery is a commitment, and that we need to place ourselves in a recovery pathway, a recovery community, right? And make sure that we, no matter what, even when we feel like leaving and doing something else, that we keep our feet planted in that community.
Very well said. We covered a lot here today. Is there anything that I didn't ask that I missed that you wanted to talk about?
No, I've covered.
I feel like
there's nothing that I can think of that I left out.
Okay. Perfect.
But,
well, thank you so much for sharing your extremely powerful story. It really is, and it's going to help so many people. And for you coming out to share it with us today, it means the world to us. So thanks for supporting On the Road to Recovery.
Thank you very much. We'll sit back, we'll pray about it, we'll figure this out. I'll get back to you in a little bit and let you know how this worked itself out. Check you later.